What is going on, guys? This is Crozen, and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 build. I know I've been kind of occupied lately, haven't really put too much out, but we are going to continue with Baldur's Gate 3. I'm hoping that I can get in the beta, that way I could do some new subclass builds for you guys. But in the meantime, I have a Minthara Oathbreaker Paladin Necromancer build here. You could also use this for your main character. I just feel like this really suits Minthara, since it does kind of have that evil vibe to it. And this is a fun little creative build because not too many people try to mix a paladin and a wizard together, but there's actually a lot of good synergy. I mean, you can get fireball from the wizard side, you can conjure an elemental or a minor elemental, you're also going to get animate dead, and you still will get that control undead from the Oathbreaker side, where you will have a unique undead NPC that can follow you around and do some pretty good damage as well. And I think you guys are going to love this one, so let's get to making it. So beginning with our starting class and our ability points, we are going to want to start out as a Devotion Paladin, mainly because they are by far the easiest subclass that can break their oath. You really only have to go slay a random NPC.
Broken your oath, Paladin.
And then for our ability points, Strength and Charisma are going to be our two main ability points here, so you want to go ahead and just pump those up to 16. From there, I just go with 14 Constitution, 12 Dexterity, and then I lower Intelligence and Wisdom down to 8. And then for the skill proficiencies, Athletics and Intimidation. So now that we're level 2, we could go through the level path all the way up to level 12 for Minthara, and it's very simple what we're trying to accomplish at this point. We just want to get that extra attack as soon as possible, which means we are going to pump up the Paladin levels. So we do get our fighting style at level 2, and for this one, just go ahead and select Great Weapon Fighting. At level 3, you get arguably the best class action for an Oathbreaker, and that is Control Undead. And Control Undead will allow you to control any undead creature, so you have some very good ones in Act 2, such as the Dark Justiciars, but then in Act 3, one of my personal favorites will be the Death Knights that you can get from the Myrtle Tribunal. Those guys are pretty badass, they have a lot of nice abilities, and they can even use Riposte if an enemy does miss their attack. So it's a very creative class action with only one downside, and that is that it does require a wisdom save. So you will have to worry about that, and yeah, can be a bit of a hassle if you are playing in honor mode and you're not reloading any saves, but other than that, it is a very fun class action to use. Now that we're level 4, we get our first feat, and I recommend everyone to go with Savage Attacker here. Savage Attacker is just going to give you so much more for a paladin than other melee classes, simply because it works with Divine Smite and it works with your criticals, so you can get some crazy damage with Savage Attacker. And I want to mention this now, we are not going to go with ability improvement for this build, so you will be hanging at 16 strength. So what I do recommend everyone to do is to get Potion of Everlasting Vigor as soon as you pick up Minthara. That way she's going to start with 18 strength, and then you're going to ride 18 strength all the way until Act 3 when you can get the strength gloves, and that should work pretty well, especially if you do have Risky Ring on, which we will be using with this build. So I just want to point that out now, that way there's no confusion as to why we're not leveling up our strength. At level 5, we do get our extra attack, which is one of the main class features for any melee character. So go ahead, put that point into a paladin, and then at level 6, I also like to pick up Aura of Protection here. This will give you and your allies a +3 bonus to saving throws because we do have 16 charisma, and that's going to be very useful, especially early on in the game. So level 6 is a very good stopping point for a paladin. So now that we're level 7, this is a perfect opportunity to multiclass into a wizard. I know Oathbreaker Paladins do get Aura of Hate, and that is pretty good for Minthara and her Control Undead if they do have a melee weapon, but for all other summons in this game, they don't use melee weapons, so it's really not going to be useful at all. So I like to leave that one out and just go ahead and multiclass into a wizard here. And then for the 3 cantrips, you want to make sure you go for the cantrips that don't involve any kind of damage, so that way, we're not going to suffer from our 8 intelligence. So go with Friends here, Mage Hand, also Minor Illusion. And the same rule applies for spells other than for Magic Missile, since this one doesn't require any kind of hit chance. So I like to go for Magic Missile here, Long Strider, Enhanced Leap. Make sure you pick up Shield. This is a very good one to have for a melee character. And then I also pick up Featherfall. So now that we're level 8, this build really starts to come online simply because we unlock level 3 spell slots. And what this means is that we're able to scribe all different types of level 3 scrolls. So now you can go for Fireball, you could go for Animate Dead, that way you get that additional summon, and it really starts to make you feel like a Necromancer. We also get our subclass, so you want to go ahead and select Necromancy here. And then for the 2 spells, as I mentioned, these level 1 spells aren't really going to be of much use at this point. Just select anything you want. I just go with Grease and Disguise Self. At level 9, we do get 2 additional spells, and these will be level 2 spells. So if you haven't already, now is your chance to go ahead and select Misty Step, as Oathbreaker Paladins cannot get Misty Step. And then from there, you could go with anything you want here, anything that you haven't scribed already as a scroll. So anything will work here. Cloud of Daggers, Invisibility, these are some really nice ones to have. So now that we're level 10, we get our second feat, and I like to go with Great Weapon Master here. Not only will this increase your melee damage, but whenever you land a critical hit or kill a target with a melee attack, you will get an additional bonus attack as a bonus action, which is very good for paladins because paladins don't really have much uses for their bonus actions other than Minthara's exclusive soul branding feature that she has, which is a bonus action. So for our cantrip, you could go ahead and select anything you want here. I just pick up Light. And then for the 2 additional spells, if you haven't picked up Invisibility by now, that's a really nice one to have. I also like to pick up Enlarge, Reduce. Now that we're level 11, we do unlock level 3 spells, but most of these you will already have simply from learning them through scrolls. So Animate Dead, Haste, Fireball, you should already have these. But if you don't, make sure that you pick these up. But again, you're able to learn these from scrolls at level 8. So definitely make sure you get Animate Dead because that is the whole theme of this build. But one spell that you cannot learn from a scroll will be Counterspell. So make sure that you pick this up because this is the only way that you're able to unlock Counterspell. And then from there, pick anything that you don't have already. So in this case, I'm just going to select Fireball. And finally, we reach level 12, which means that we get some very good benefits at max level. Those being Undead Thrall's additional Undead, which means that you can raise an additional corpse with Animate Dead. And you also get Bender Summons, which means that those Animate Dead creatures will deal additional damage equal to your proficiency bonus, which I believe in my case it's 4. And then we also get a level 5 spell slot, which means that we're able to summon 2 flying ghouls if we choose. And those flying ghouls can paralyze creatures, but it does have a very low difficulty class in order for enemies to succeed that, so it's up to you whether you want to use flying ghouls or not. We also get 2 more additional level 3 spells, so as I mentioned, if you didn't already get haste, make sure you get haste now, and then from there you can go ahead and select anything else that you want here. I just pick up Sleet Storm. So now we could go through the gear setup for Minthara, and this gear setup is going to be relatively simple. It's going to be basically what every melee paladin wants, and that is a lot of critical hit gear. So we're going to be going with the Saravox Horn Helmet that you can get in Act 3. A good alternative in Act 2 will be Circle of Bones, especially if you don't have Animate Dead and you're tackling on the Gauntlet of Shar prior to level 8. So this is good. That way you can get that level 3 necromancy spell earlier on in the game if you do go that route. You also got Cloak of the Weave here. This is mainly for the spell save difficulty class. You can still use Flesh Melter Cloak that you can get in Act 2. I believe that's when you get this. And then we're going to go with Armor of Persistence for our endgame heavy armor set. You can use any type of armor that you want. However, I recommend going with heavy armor since we don't have too much dexterity in order to get a nice armor class bonus that way. For the gauntlets, we are going to use Gauntlets of Hill Giant Strength in Act 3. This will set your strength to 23, which means that you won't have to worry about never leveling up your strength with this particular build. In Act 2, you will get some very good alternatives though. Those will be Gloves of the Automaton, and then also the Flawed Hell Dust Gloves, which will give you additional fire damage. And then for the boots, I just go with Evasive Shoes here. Nothing very complex there, just going with a +1 bonus to the armor class. For the necklaces, we do have a whole bunch of necklaces that you can use with this build. You can really use whatever you want, but I find that once you get into Act 3, Broodmother's Revenge works really well in tandem with Ring of Regeneration. So prior to that, you may want to be using Caustic Ban instead of Ring of Regeneration, and then we are going to use Risky Ring as well that you get in Act 2, simply because this build doesn't have a very high hit chance since we're only going to have 18 strength. If that is a problem for you though, you can just use Gloves of the Automaton and you can get advantage that way. You also have the Unseen Menace, which you can get in Act 1, and this will also give you advantage until you miss your attack roll. I also want to mention Spellcrux Amulet that you get in Act 3. This is going to be very useful for this build because it can restore that level 5 spell slot, which means that you will be able to not only summon 2 Flying Ghouls, which requires a level 5 Animate Dead, but also a Fire Elemental, which also requires level 5 Conjure Elemental. For the weapon, we're going to go with the Baldur's Giant Slayer. It's really the best two-handed greatsword in this game, so you kind of want to get this in Act 3. But you have a lot of good options with paladins. I mean, they're so versatile, they could just use just about any two-handed weapon out there. I did mention the Unseen Menace, and I recommend that most people use this, especially if you're not going to use Risky Ring, as this will give you advantage because your weapon will be invisible. You also have the Drake Throat Glaive that you can get in Act 2, also the Doom Hammer, which can be useful against all of those undead creatures in Act 2. And then for the bow, we're just going to go with the Deadshot, mainly for the critical hit chance here. You do have the Bow of Awareness as well as Hellrider Longbow if you want to go for Initiative instead. Next up, we could do a combat showcase featuring the Oathbreaker Paladin Necromancer here. So as always in my videos, I do have Elixir Bloodlust and Haste activated, that way I can showcase more actions and you guys can get a complete picture on how this build works. So as you can see, we don't really have the highest initiative simply because we only have 12 dexterity, and that's really one of the only downsides to this build. So you're not going to be starting first like Shadowheart over here, but that's okay for this build, especially since it's a heavy armor based build. I'm not really too concerned about it. And when you do have a bunch of enemies grouped up like this, preferably 3 or more, that is when Fireball is just going to be the best action to use here. So I'm just going to go ahead and use Fireball and light these 4 enemies up. And then from there we can get into our melee actions. So we do have Soul Branding, which is a very good bonus action for Minthara, but once you unlock Great Weapon Master at level 10 with this build, then it's going to become very situational using Soul Branding, simply because you can get an additional bonus action by getting a crit or killing an enemy with Great Weapon Master. So at that point, Great Weapon Master is just going to have much more of a benefit than using Soul Branding. So in this case, I'm just going to leave Soul Branding off. That way I can get that additional bonus action once I get a crit or a kill here. So I'm just going to, I guess we will go back into our Flying Ghouls here and just take this enemy out so that way I don't trigger an opportunity attack. So we could just go ahead and take that guy out. And as you can see, I am using 2 Flying Ghouls as well as a Fire Elemental, and I do have That Which Lurks, which is a Death Knight from the Myrtle Tribunal, which you can use Control Undead on. And as you can see, these guys have enormous health and they do some pretty decent damage too, and they are very tanky. So I like going with one of those guys once I get into Act 3. So then we could go back into our other Flying Ghoul here and just go ahead and do the same thing. I'll go on this enemy since it's a 70% hit chance. Now you're not going to be paralyzing too many enemies with this, unfortunately, because it is a Constitution save, and I believe the difficulty class is like really low. It's only a 10, so in most cases they're going to succeed that saving throw. But if that's a problem for you, then you can just go with the undead skellies or the zombies. Either one of them works. So now we could go into our Fire Elemental, and we could even use a mini Fireball with Erupting Cinder here. So I'm going to use this on these 3 enemies, maybe. I was trying to get 4 in, but I don't think I could reach that enemy. So we'll just go right here. And then now we could go back into Minthara and finally clean house, basically. So we could just go over here, take this enemy out pretty easily. and I'm going to choose not to use this. Another thing here, as you guys can see, I do have Luck of the Far Realms, which is an Illithid power. I do recommend getting this for Minthara. She's already open to using Illithid powers, and this just means you get 1 extra critical hit every long rest, which is amazing. So you can always just keep that in your back pocket until you need it for a boss or something like that. So I'm going to choose not to react there. And now we got our bonus attack from Great Weapon Master. So I'm just going to use this on this enemy right here. Again, I'm not going to use my critical hit yet, and I will just use a regular level 1 Divine Smite to take that enemy out, and then we could just keep on going and just cleaning house here. So I'll just go for this enemy next. We did get a critical, so this is going to deal some massive damage on this enemy here. I might be able to use a level 1 Divine Smite, but just to be safe, I'll do a level 2 to take this enemy out. And yeah, 37, I probably could have got away with a level 1 there. So now we got another attack. So let's just go ahead and use this. And since this enemy is at full health, this is basically our version of a boss here, 83 health. I'm going to use Luck of the Far Realms, get that critical, and then go ahead and use another level 2 Divine Smite. And yeah, I mean, this build is so powerful, and we still haven't even used our Death Knight yet, which is pretty ridiculous. So I'm just going to go back over here, and let's just use our last attack on this enemy. And we might as well just use that level 4 Divine Smite, which it still won't take this enemy out simply because it wasn't a crit, but that is okay. Now we get to see that which lurks in action. So now we could do a showcase of our Death Knight here, and if you take a look, our Death Knight is actually in green, not in blue like the rest of our summons, which means that we cannot directly control it, which I find kind of ironic because the class action is called Control Undead. So basically what our Death Knight is going to do here is just attack what's closest to it. So in this case, Mr. Dart here. And the cool thing about Control Undead is that it keeps the initial actions of whatever enemy you control. So in this case, our Death Knight has a level 4 spell called Staggering Smite, as well as extra attack and riposte. So you get some very good powerful abilities there, as well as having a pretty tanky NPC here with 237 HP. So let's go ahead and end our turn and see our Death Knight in action. And as you can see, our Death Knight can do some pretty decent damage because it has that extra attack, and it is so tanky, so when an enemy attacks our Death Knight or our controlled undead rather than our party members, that's so useful in higher difficulties because that keeps our party members alive, and it basically just sacrifices our controlled undead. So because our Death Knight has 237 health, this thing is just an absolute tank. So at this point, we can just go ahead and clean up. So we can use Soul Branding here since there's only one enemy left. That will apply fire to the blade and will give us a little bit of extra damage on our first attack. And I'm going to use Topple the Big Folk, which is a class action unique to the Baldur's Giant Slayer, and finish the fight. So I hope you guys enjoyed my Minthara Oathbreaker Paladin Necromancer build, and this build can also work on your main character. It's a very versatile build. I just feel like it just suits Minthara better because of her evil characteristics, and it doesn't really sacrifice any of your paladin damage, and that's the biggest thing here. I mean, it just adds to your damage because you have those summons available as well. So I appreciate you guys watching till the end. Let me know what other kind of builds you want to see, and I will see you in the next one.